The tax notice said my land had a commercial improvement on it. I had 11 acres of cedar and live oak in the Texas Hill Country, and not so much as a garden shed, so I assumed the county had made a mistake, and I drove out to the far corner of my own property on a Tuesday in August to prove it. There was a cell tower back there, 140 feet of it, disguised as a pine tree, humming quietly to itself behind the cedar break. It had been there 4 years. My name is Wade Kessler. I'm 57, and for 30 years I did revenue assurance for a wireless carrier, which is a boring way of saying I audited cell site leases. Thousands of them. My whole professional life was reading ground leases, matching them to payment records, and finding the leaks. The site paying rent to a dead man's estate. The site whose lease expired in 2009 and nobody noticed. The site paying the wrong LLC because a paralegal fat-fingered a routing number in 1998. I know what belongs in a site file the way a surgeon knows what belongs in an abdomen. Nobody in Sonora Ridge knew that about me. They knew a quiet retiree with too much land and a wife who made good pecan bars. That turned out to matter a great deal. I should explain how a man doesn't notice a cell tower on his own property for 4 years, because that was the first thing everybody asked, usually in a tone that suggested I might be an idiot. 11 acres in the hill country isn't a lawn. It's country. The far northeast corner sits across a dry creek bed and behind a wall of ash junipers so thick you can't see 30 feet into it, on ground too rocky to do anything with. Lori and I hadn't walked back there since the year we bought it. The tower was a stealth monopine, one of those fake pines the carriers use in scenic areas, gray-green and unremarkable against a ridge full of actual trees. And here's the part that was engineered, though I didn't know it yet. The gravel access road to that tower didn't come from my driveway. It came from the subdivision, from Sonora Ridge's back gate, along their fence line, straight to my corner. Every truck that ever serviced that tower drove in through their neighborhood and never crossed my land at all. 4 years. Humming away in the cedar, making somebody $2,800 a month. I stood at the chain link and read the little sign, authorized personnel only, and a phone number, and my 40-year professional reflex kicked in before my anger did. I took out my phone and I photographed the ASR numbers stenciled on the mast. Antenna Structure Registration. Every tower in this country has one, and the FCC database will tell you, in about 9 seconds, exactly who owns it. Lori, when I got home, said the reasonable thing. Maybe it's on the HOA's land, Wade. Maybe the line's not where you think. I got the survey out of the safe, the one I'd paid for at closing, stamped and sealed. Then I got my GPS, and I walked the boundary with it in 101 degrees of August. And I want to be precise, because precision is the only religion I've got. The tower stood 90 feet inside my property line. The ASR came back to Caprock Wireless. I called their lease administration department the next morning and did not raise my voice, because I have been the person on the other end of that phone, and shouting gets you a case number and nothing else. I said I was the landowner at that site, and I had questions about the ground lease. The woman was polite and helpful, and what she told me rearranged the furniture in my chest. Payments are current, sir. $2,800 a month, no interruptions, per the ground lease, the one you signed 4 years ago. I've never signed a ground lease in my life, I said. Would you email me a copy? She did. And there it was. A 25-year ground lease for the northeast corner of my parcel. $2,800 a month, with a 5-year escalator. My property's legal description typed out perfect and correct. And at the bottom, above my printed name, a signature. It was a good forgery. Whoever did it had studied. The W had the right lean. But it wasn't mine. I've watched my own hand write that name for 57 years, and the tail on the second L was a stranger's tail. And the notary block below it was stamped by a notary I'd never met, swearing that Wade Kessler had appeared personally before him on a day I could account for. Then I looked at the payee line, which is where an auditor always looks, because the document is theater and the money is the truth. $2,800 a month for 4 years went to something called the Sonora Ridge Community Enhancement Committee, LLC. I'd lived next to Sonora Ridge for 11 years. There was no such committee. Charla Bevins was the president of the Sonora Ridge HOA. 51, sharp, a former bank branch manager, and I want you to hold on to that detail because it's not incidental. Realtors know houses, bankers know money, how to form an entity, how to open an account in its name, how to route an ACH, how to make a paper trail look like plumbing instead of theft. She'd run the association for 6 years, and the neighborhood adored her, for one specific reason I was about to slam into like a windshield. I found her at the community mailboxes and asked her, calmly, what she knew about a cell tower on my land. She didn't flinch, not for a second. That's the thing I've thought about most since. There was no guilty pause, no scramble. She smiled the way you smile at a man who's confused about something simple. Wade, isn't it wonderful? The committee worked on that for 2 years. This whole valley had no signal, remember? People couldn't call 911 from their own kitchens. We brought coverage to Sonora Ridge. Then, sweetly, but honey, that tower's on the association's common area. I think you've got your property line confused. Those old surveys are a mess out here. I told her I'd walked it with GPS, 90 feet inside my line. And Charla Bevins looked me right in the face and said, surveys can say all kinds of things. I'd be careful, Wade. People around here waited a long time for that signal. You don't want to be the man who takes it away. That was the whole shape of it, right there in the first 60 seconds. She had stolen from me, and her defense was that the neighborhood loved what she'd stolen. So I went home, and I did the only thing I've ever been any good at. I opened a file. 30 years of auditing site leases had left me with a checklist that runs in my head automatically, and I worked it. The FCC registration. Caprock Wireless. Confirmed. The survey and my deed. The corner is mine. Unambiguous. Recorded. The lease. Forged signature. Notary block from a man I'd never met. The payee. An LLC. And Texas, God bless it, makes entity filings public. The Sonora Ridge Community Enhancement Committee, LLC, had exactly 1 member, 1 manager, 1 registered agent, 1 everything. Charla Bevins. Then I did the piece that turned my private grievance into something much bigger, and it started with a question that had been nagging me since the mailboxes. She'd said, the committee, not the association. So I pulled the HOA's own budget. I know a few people, and an association's finances aren't a state secret. And I read 4 years of it line by line. There was no tower revenue, not a dollar, not a line item, not a footnote, not a reserve fund fattened by $33,600 a year of found money. The association's bylaws listed 9 committees, and a community enhancement committee was not among them. She hadn't taken the tower money on behalf of the neighborhood. She'd taken it from the neighborhood, too. 4 years, $2,800 a month, $134,400, into the personal account of a woman who'd been standing at potlucks for 4 years accepting thanks for bringing us all cell service. I want to be honest about what happened next, because this is the part that nearly beat me. I thought the neighborhood would be on my side. I thought I'd walk into the clubhouse with a survey and a forged signature and 200 people would be horrified. Instead, Charla got out in front of it, and she was so good at it that I almost admired the work. Within a week, the story going around Sonora Ridge wasn't, the president forged a lease. It was, Wade Kessler is trying to tear down our tower. And the thing is, These people had spent a decade without a signal in a canyon where a heart attack meant driving to the ridge to call for help. A woman named Patty had, allegedly, been unable to call an ambulance for her husband in 2019. That story got told a lot. Charla made sure of it. And so the man who'd been robbed became the man who wanted to take away 911 from your children, and people who'd waved at Lori for 11 years started looking through her at the grocery store. Hoyt Landry didn't, though. Hoyt was 74, had been on that road since before there was a subdivision, and he came out to my truck one evening with a beer and a memory. "They built that thing through our back gate," he said. 4 years ago. I asked one of the crew, and he said it was the HOA's tower, on HOA common ground. I remember thinking that was odd, because I'd have swore that corner was yours. He squinted at the ridge. Charla stood at the gate with a clipboard the whole first day, like a foreman. Then Charla did something that told me she was more frightened than she looked, and it was the mistake that hanged her. She recorded an easement. 4 years after the fact, an access and utility easement appeared in the county records, granting a right-of-way across my property to the tower, signed, of course, by Wade Kessler. A second forgery filed to paper over the fact that the first one had no legal access. She was trying to build a fence around her lie, after I'd already found the gate open. And when Ramona Ash, my attorney, a real estate and fraud litigator out of Austin, who took one look at my file and cleared her afternoon, pulled that easement, she saw what I saw in about 4 seconds. The same notary stamp, same commission number as the lease. One notary. Both forgeries. A cousin of Charla's, as it turned out, with a stamp and a very relaxed attitude about who appeared personally before him. The site file was the kill shot, and it came from an unexpected direction, the carrier itself. Dana Whitfield ran lease administration at Caprock, and when I proved my ownership and demanded the complete site file for the tower on my land, she went very quiet on the phone. And then she called me back an hour later with the voice of a woman watching a building settle. "Mr. Kessler, our 25-year asset is sitting on land we do not have a lease for. Understand, Caprock wasn't the villain. Caprock was a victim, and a badly exposed one. They'd built a $200,000 tower, run fiber to it, hung 3 carriers' equipment on it, and made every payment on time for 4 years. To the wrong person, based on a lease their own site acquisition agent had signed with a woman who'd represented herself as authorized to act for the landowner. Their site file contained the forged lease, the fake notary block, a W-9 for Charla's LLC, and 48 ACH payment confirmations. $134,400, documented, wired from their headquarters in Oklahoma to an account in Texas, month after month after month. That last detail is the one Charla the banker should have caught, and it's the one that took this out of the county courthouse. Money crossing state lines by wire, obtained by fraud. That's not a property dispute. That's federal. Caprock's lawyers, once they understood the exposure, came to me with a solution, and I want to tell you about it because I'm still a little proud of what I did. They offered to make it quiet. Sign a retroactive lease, they said, at a generous rate. They'd pay me 4 years of back rent out of their own pocket, plus a premium for my trouble. Just don't file anything. Don't make it a criminal matter. Let's fix the paperwork and move on. It was, I'd guess, $200,000 sitting on the table to make a crime into an accounting adjustment. I thought about it for one night. Lori and I sat on the porch and she asked me what I was chewing on, and I said, "If I take the money, Charla keeps the $134,000, keeps her presidency, keeps her cousin's stamp. And there's a notary in this county who's been swearing that strangers appeared before him, for God knows how long, on God knows how many documents. Somebody older than me. Somebody without a survey and a safe." I called Caprock's lawyer in the morning and said no. Then I said something else. because 30 years in that industry meant I knew their lease structure better than the man reading it to me. There's a 5-year escalation amendment coming due on that site in about 6 weeks, I said. Your standard form. Rent steps up, and you need the landowner's signature to execute it. There was a long pause on the line while he found it in the file. She's going to have to sign my name again, I said, in front of you. We built the sting around the amendment, and Dana Whitfield ran it with a cold enthusiasm I'll admire for the rest of my life, because it was her department that had been defrauded, and she took it personally. Caprock sent Charla the standard notice, escalation amendment ready for landowner execution, and given the value, could the landowner's representative please come to the Austin office to sign in person? She came. Of course she came. $33,600 a year for another 5 years. Why wouldn't she? I sat behind the glass in the next room with 2 investigators from the county's white-collar unit, and I watched Charla Bevins walk into that conference room in her good blazer, all warmth, apologizing for the traffic. Dana slid the amendment across the table and asked her, on camera, to confirm she was authorized to sign on behalf of the landowner. "Oh, absolutely," Charla said. "Wade's not well, you know. He asked me to handle it." Then she took out a pen, and in a clean, unhurried hand, she wrote Wade Kessler on a federal value contract and pressed her cousin's notary stamp into the paper beside it. I opened the door. I don't know what I'd expected to feel. What I actually felt was the flat professional satisfaction of a reconciliation that finally balances. I set my deed and my driver's license on the table in front of her and I said, "I'm Wade Kessler. That's my land. And that's my name you just wrote." The investigators came in behind me. For the first time in 4 years, Charla Bevins had nothing to say. The search warrants went out that week, and the notary stamp opened into something none of us had guessed at. Charla's cousin hadn't just notarized 2 documents for her. His seal was on dozens of instruments across the county, easements, leases, powers of attorney. A small, quiet factory of sworn lies. And Charla, once forensic accountants got into her LLC, turned out to have been running more than a tower. She'd been pocketing the rent on a billboard that sat on actual HOA common ground and skimming assessments through the same account. She hadn't stolen from a neighbor. She'd been farming her entire neighborhood for 6 years while they applauded her at potlucks. In her interview, she did not say she couldn't recall. She sat up straight and explained, with real indignation, that she had brought coverage to a valley that had gone 100 years without it, that people could call for an ambulance now because of her, and that the land had been sitting there doing nothing anyway. She defended forging a man's name onto a 25-year contract as a public service. It was the truest thing she ever said. She genuinely believed that a good outcome made the theft into a favor. Here's how it landed. Charla Bevins was convicted of forgery of a recorded instrument, theft over $100,000, and wire fraud in federal court because those 48 ACH payments came across state lines. She went to prison, years, not months, was ordered to pay back every dollar to me and every skimmed dollar to the association, and was barred for life from serving on any community board. Her cousin lost his notary commission and pled to fraud, and the county began the long, grinding work of unwinding every document his stamp ever touched, which is still going on and has already given 3 other families back rights they didn't know they'd lost. The forged lease and the phantom easement were struck from the county records like they'd never existed. Caprock, grateful, frankly, to have a clean landowner and a valid instrument, signed a real ground lease with me at the current market rate, and paid the 4 years of back rent they'd already paid once, this time to the person who was actually owed it. The association got its skimmed assessments back and hired a management company that requires 2 signatures on everything, which is a sentence I find genuinely beautiful. And the tower stayed. That's the part I want to end on because it's the part that mattered to me. I could have made them take it down. I had the leverage. No lease, no easement, an unlawful structure on my land. Half the county expected me to do it, and Charla had spent months telling everyone I would. But the tower was never the crime. The signature was the crime. The tower was just the thing she hid behind, and if I'd torn it down, I'd have proven her right about me and punished 200 people for what one woman did. So, it stayed.
And then I did one more thing. Caprock's lease gives me some say about what hangs on that mast, and I offered the county, for free, in perpetuity, space on it for the emergency services repeater. Fire, EMS, sheriff. The dead zone that Charla had made her whole legend out of solving is now genuinely, permanently solved, on my land, at no charge, forever. The tower that stole 4 years of my property is now the reason an ambulance can hear a dispatcher out here. Hoyt Landry sits on the new board. Dana Whitfield got promoted for catching a title defect that could have cost her company that site. Lori can go to the HEB again without anybody looking through her. It's evening as I write this, the heat finally breaking. Lori and I walked back to the northeast corner today, across the dry creek and through the cedar, and the monopine stood there humming in the last of the light, pretending to be a tree, doing its honest work at last. I hung a gate across that gravel road this week. My gate, my lock, my land. And I drove into Austin and handed a key to Dana Whitfield and told her the crews are welcome any time. Because that's what access looks like when it's real. You ask the owner. He says yes. He gives you a key. Then I came home and filed the closing documents in a folder, the way I have filed documents my entire life. And I thought about that tax notice that started all of it. Charla Bevins outplanned everybody. She thought of the disguised tower and the access road through her own gate, and the cousin with the stamp. She thought of everything except the boring thing. The county assessor noticed a commercial improvement on a parcel and sent the owner a bill. 30 years in revenue assurance taught me exactly one thing worth passing on. The numbers always talk first. Long before anybody sees anything, the arithmetic knows. It sits there in an envelope on your kitchen counter, being quietly, boringly correct, waiting for somebody to walk out to the far corner of his own land and look at what it's pointing at. Here's what I keep turning over about this one. Charla Bevins didn't steal a house or bulldoze a garage. She stole a signature, and then rented out 90 feet of another man's dirt for $134,000 while standing at potlucks accepting thanks for it. And the genius of the scheme wasn't the forgery, it was the cover. She picked a crime whose product everybody loved. A whole valley that couldn't call an ambulance suddenly had bars on their phones, and she made herself the hero of it, so that when the actual victim finally spoke up, he wasn't a robbed man. He was the villain trying to take away your 911. That's the move worth studying. When a thief steals something that makes everyone else's life better, the neighbors will guard the theft for her. Notice how Wade won. Because it wasn't nerve and it wasn't a lawyer. It was a tax notice. The county assessors saw a commercial improvement and mailed a bill, and the arithmetic told the truth years before anyone's eyes did. Then 30 years of auditing site leases did the rest. The ASR number on the mast that identifies any tower in America, the site file, the W-9, the 48 ACH payments. She'd outthought the surveyor and the neighbors and even the carrier. She never thought about the bookkeeping. The legal spine is worth keeping. A forged signature on a recorded instrument is a felony, not a paperwork problem. Nobody can lease your land but you, no matter how good the outcome looks. And once the money crosses state lines by wire, a county fraud becomes a federal case. And the tell that broke it open was the notary. One stamp on 2 forgeries, which turned out to be a stamp on dozens. But the choice I respect most is the one at the end. Wade could have torn that tower down. He had every right. Instead, he separated the thing from the theft, kept the tower, kept the coverage, put the county's emergency repeater on it for free, and let Charla go to prison alone, rather than punishing 200 neighbors for what one woman did. Punish the hand, not the pole it hid behind. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If someone were quietly collecting money off your property right now, a lease, a signature, a document with your name on it that you never wrote, what would actually tell you? Not your eyes. Wade's own land hid a 140-foot tower for 4 years. It was a piece of mail he almost threw away. The numbers always talk first. Most people just never walk out to the corner to see what they're pointing at.